The live Gooner incident. On October 19, 2020, Jeffrey Toobin, a 60-year-old legal analyst and longtime staff writer for The New Yorker, logged into a Zoom meeting from his home, believing he was participating in a routine internal discussion. The call included colleagues from the magazine and members of a radio program, and it was meant to simulate an election night scenario. Toobin assumed his camera and microphone were off. While the meeting continued for others, Toobin remained on screen. Unaware that his video feed was still active, he engaged in gooning, believing he was no longer visible. Several participants noticed what was happening in real time. Shocked attendees immediately exited the call. Within hours, the incident was reported internally. Toobin was suspended from The New Yorker pending investigation and placed on leave from CNN, where he frequently appeared as a legal commentator. Days later, he publicly acknowledged the incident, stating it was an embarrassing mistake caused by a misunderstanding of the Zoom interface. In November 2020, The New Yorker terminated his employment after 27 years. CNN later allowed him to return briefly before cutting ties permanently. What had been assumed to be a moment of private downtime during a virtual meeting became a career-ending event, the unlocked door incident. On March 14, 2019, Daniel Mercer, a 19-year-old college student, was alone in his bedroom in a suburban home in Ohio. His parents were downstairs watching television, and the house was quiet. Daniel believed he had privacy. His door was closed but unlocked, a habit formed from years of shared family space where knocking was assumed rather than enforced. Late in the evening, while he was busy gooning in his bed, his mother walked in on him to collect laundry. Assuming he was studying or asleep, she opened the door without knocking. The encounter lasted only seconds. Daniel froze. His mother immediately looked away and stepped back into the hallway, closing the door behind her without saying a word. In the hours afterward, Daniel remained in his room, overwhelmed by shame and panic. He did not leave to eat or speak. His mother avoided the hallway outside his room for the rest of the night. In the days that followed, neither acknowledged the incident. According to later accounts shared anonymously by the boy in an online forum, the incident permanently altered the emotional dynamic in the household. He described intense embarrassment, anxiety, and avoidance that lasted for years, despite no further mention of the event by either party. The Toronto serial Gooner attacker. On multiple mornings throughout 2017, a series of women in downtown Toronto reported a disturbing pattern to police. The incidents occurred in busy public areas, near transit stations, sidewalks, and commercial buildings, often during rush hour. In each case, a man approached from behind, goon and nut on their body without physical contact, and fled the scene before victims could react. After several reports were filed, Toronto police began reviewing surveillance footage and witness description. The suspect was identified as 20-year-old Indian man living in the city. Police alleged that he deliberately targeted strangers in public spaces, choosing crowded environments where he could disappear quickly. Later that year, the man was arrested and charged with multiple counts of sexual assault. Investigators stated that the acts were intentional and non-consensual, and that the absence of physical touching did not lessen the severity of the crime. During court proceedings, prosecutors emphasized the psychological harm inflicted on victims and the repeated nature of the behavior. He was ultimately convicted and sentenced under Canadian criminal law. The birthday incident. On May 3, 2022, a 26-year-old man named Anurag P. was alone in his bedroom at his family's apartment in Chiang Mai, Thailand. It was his birthday. Believing he had privacy for the afternoon, Anurag closed his door but did not lock it. Wearing headphones, he was unaware of activity outside his room. As the afternoon passed, Anurag remained absorbed in his behavior, looking for the right video to goon to on the hub. Unknown to him, his parents, relatives, and several close friends had gathered in the living room to prepare a surprise celebration. A cake had been lit with candles. Someone began recording on a phone. At approximately 6:40 p.m., the group moved down the hallway toward his room. Without knocking, his aunt opened the door. The group immediately began singing Happy Birthday in unison. The singing continued for several seconds before anyone registered what they were seeing. Anurag froze in place. The room fell into confusion as some family members turned away, while others stood silently. His mother quickly closed the door and told everyone to return to the living room. The recording ended abruptly and the celebration was canceled. That evening, Anurag did not leave his room. The following morning, Anurag was found deceased in his bedroom. Emergency services were contacted, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. The death was ruled a suicide. No note was released publicly. The vacuum incident. On August 16, 2016, a 67-year-old man was alone in his apartment in the United States. He had been gooning for several hours using a household vacuum cleaner in a way he believed was safe. As he continued, the suction from the vacuum became stronger than he expected. His dick got stuck in the vacuum and swelling quickly developed, making it impossible to pull free. Pain escalated as circulation was blocked. He panicked, but embarrassment delayed his decision to call for help, leaving him trapped in the grip of his gooning. By the time he contacted emergency services, the swelling had become severe. By the time he arrived at the hospital, the trapped tissue showed signs of necrosis, meaning it could not recover even if circulation was restored. Doctors determined that attempting to save the affected groin tissue would place the patient at risk of life-threatening infection and sepsis. At that stage, his dick has to be cut off. The man was sedated and he survived. In his statement to clinicians, he acknowledged that he had been gooning and had not understood how dangerous household suction devices could be. The case was recorded anonymously in medical literature as a preventable accident, the Enumclaw incident. On July 2, 2005, a 45-year-old Boeing engineer named Kenneth Pinion took his own gooning to another level. He visited a rural farm in Enumclaw, Washington, specifically to engage in sexual activity with a stallion. He was accompanied by a friend, James Michael Tate, who was recording the encounter on a digital camera. As the evening progressed, Pinion engaged in a sexual act with a horse that resulted in him suffering a perforated colon. A perforated colon is a hole or tear in the large intestine wall, a life-threatening medical emergency where stool leaks into the abdomen, causing severe infection and potentially fatal sepsis. Pinion did not initially realize the life-threatening nature of his injury. He and Tate spent some time watching the footage they had recorded before Pinion's condition rapidly deteriorated. At approximately 9:30 p.m., after Pinion began to experience extreme pain and went into shock, his companions drove him to the Enumclaw Community Memorial Hospital. They dropped him off at the emergency room entrance and fled the scene. Hospital staff attempted to resuscitate Pinion, but he was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The following morning, an autopsy confirmed that Pinion had died from acute peritonitis caused by the internal rupture. The Driveway Gooner incident. On May 14, 2025, an 18-year-old high school student shared a harrowing account on Reddit regarding a catastrophic failure of Bluetooth proximity settings. Late in the evening, while in the privacy of his bedroom with his door locked and noise-canceling earbuds firmly in place, he began watching explicit adult content on his smartphone. Unbeknownst to him, his father had recently parked the family's SUV in the driveway directly beneath his bedroom window, leaving the electronics in accessory mode. As the teenager adjusted his phone's volume to the maximum setting, the device's auto-connect feature bypassed his earbuds and paired with the vehicle's high-fidelity sound system. The graphic audio from the video did not play in his ears, but instead blasted at full volume through the car's speakers. At that exact moment, his older sister was sitting in the driver's seat, having just entered the vehicle to run a late-night errand. Startled by the sudden eruption of explicit audio, she initially believed the car's infotainment system had been hacked or a prank was being played. The teenager, realizing his earbuds were silent despite the volume bar being full, looked out his window to see his sister staring at the dashboard in horror before frantically turning off the ignition. The incident resulted in an immediate and deeply uncomfortable family confrontation. The opportunist Gooner incident. On August 15, 2023, San Diego police officer Anthony Hare arrested a woman on a bench warrant and began a standard transport to the Las Colinas Women's Detention Facility. During the drive, body camera footage captured a sexually suggestive conversation of the woman telling Hare she's down to fuck right now. As they approached the facility at approximately 1:33 a.m., Hare diverted his patrol cruiser onto a dark residential side street, turned off his headlights, and deactivated his body-worn camera. Unbeknownst to him at the time, entering the rear passenger compartment to be with the detainee would trigger the vehicle's automatic safety locks. Hare inadvertently locked himself inside the caged rear cabin with the woman, becoming trapped for over an hour. Panic-stricken and unable to open the doors from the inside, he was eventually forced to call a fellow officer for assistance, initially claiming he was checking the woman's pulse during a medical emergency. A supervisor arrived at 2:40 a.m. to extricate a visibly embarrassed Hare from the vehicle. Investigators found that Hare had falsely notified dispatch of his arrival at the detention center and discovered traces of semen on his duty belt. Hare resigned on September 14, 2023, just one day before a scheduled interview with Internal Affairs. By July 2024, his peace officer certification was officially revoked by the California Peace Officer Standards Accountability Board. The incorrigible Gooner. In 2006, Dennis James Davidson, a then 29-year-old man, began a series of public gooning that eventually led to his branding as an incorrigible masturbator by the Oregon court system. His first recorded incident occurred while he was living with his grandmother. A neighbor witnessed him standing on another neighbor's porch, gooning. When confronted by the witness, Davidson thrust his hips toward her and shouted, "You want some of this?" before police arrived and found items in his backpack, including lubricant and a note expressing a frustrating crush on the woman whose porch porch he had occupied. Just weeks later, Davidson was caught gooning again on an elementary school playground in full view of 3 children and several school staff members, resulting in his first significant prison term. Upon his release in 2008, he was arrested again within 4 months for gooning in a strip mall parking lot in front of 3 women and a toddler. This pattern reached a peak in 2011 when, only 4 days after being released from prison for his previous crimes, he was spotted behind a tree at a Salem park gooning while watching a family on a picnic. Due to his extensive history of recidivism, a lower court initially sentenced him to life in prison under Oregon's true life sentencing laws for repeat sex offenders.